Hi, welcome to Creative Sustenance, a show about food you may not be familiar with, found in places you may not expect to find it. We'll be taking you into the forests, fields, backyards, and sidewalks of Wisconsin as we forage for and collect wild edibles. We'll then take those plants that we find back into our kitchen where we'll create some tasty dishes, things that you can create at home yourself. We hope you enjoy the show. Howdy. Common milkweed. We're in a field not too far from Lake Michigan, and there are quite a number, as there usually are with milkweed. They grow in colonies. I think what we'll do is we'll go through a few basic identifying traits of the plant, and then we'll talk a little bit about what you can get off of it as far as wild edibles are concerned. And then I'm going to collect a basket full of the flower heads, the edible part that we'll be getting today, for use later on in the kitchen. Identifying the milkweed, most people know it when they see it. The telltale pods that come out later in the year, later in the summer. Right now, it's a little early. It's end of June. Although the season has moved up a little bit because it's been an unusually warm year this year. But to identify a milkweed, among other things, everybody knows, I think, that there's a white sap, a white latex sap in milkweed. When I was a kid, I was always told that the sap was poisonous, that it was a poisonous plant. Not true. If you look at this plant, you can see the sap coming out of there. It is sticky, but if you taste it, it's not bitter by any means. It almost has an herbal greenness to it, slightly sweet, like a green herb sweet, like maybe like a basil type sweet, but not toxic. If you do come across what you think is milkweed and you taste the sap and it's bitter, don't eat it. It's probably dog bane. Another identifying characteristic of milkweed is the basic shape of that stalk of the milkweed is angular, like a square. The cross section is squarish, whereas with dog bane, which is a toxic plant that you don't want to have anything to do with, the cross section, the stem, the main stalk, I should say, is round in cross section. Other identifying traits of the milkweed: the stalk itself is pretty much of one diameter from bottom to top. Dog bane would taper, would get much smaller at the top than at the bottom. Milkweed is pretty much one diameter throughout. The leaves of the milkweed alternate at right angles to one another. They're opposite of each other. One group of two, followed by another group of two, followed by another group of two, and so on. The leaves above and below are at right angles to one another. So here you see two leaves opposite of one another. Right above it, at right angles to those bottom two, the next set of two, and so forth, all the way up to the stalk. Right now, early in the year, around May, early spring, up in our area, milkweed, you can harvest it when it is 8-10 inches tall, the whole plant, just the shoots, and harvest it just like you would maybe asparagus, a small asparagus, and then you'll eat the whole plant. At this point, when the flower heads are forming, that's the next edible, and that's the next part of the season, early to midsummer. When the flower heads come out, that's the part that we're going to harvest today. After that, late summer, even into the fall, depending on the weather conditions and so forth, that's when the pods will come out, and the pods are edible. So what you want with the pods, and if fortune favors us, we will come back when when the pods are beginning to show, and we'll harvest some of those as well. But those you want to get when they're maybe 1-2 inches big, and that's when you can use them in stir fries and things like that. But today, this time of year, we're after this right here, these little flower clusters, which look like broccoli, don't taste like broccoli. Actually a little bit sweeter, more like a wild clover perhaps, but we'll just cut that off and we'll take that back and use that part. The flower heads, they grow in clusters like this, and eventually they will, I've picked a couple here. In this field there are a number of milkweed plants in various stages of development. And I picked a couple over there where the flowers were in full bloom. And here you can see those. They grow into these little 5-petaled crown shapes when they open up. And these really are rather sweet. They do have a sweetness that reminds me a little bit of clover, of wild clover. When the flowers die away, that's when the pods will form. And everyone, I think, knows what milkweed pods look like. Kind of an egg shape with a pointy end, rough on the outside, filled with silk and seeds that when they dry and the pods burst open, the seeds are carried along on those little silk parachutes. Right now, this plant that I just picked this one off of, the flowers are shut yet, and we're going to harvest those and use them in the kitchen. We'll show you what we're going to do when we get back there, but we're not going to harvest everything. You don't want to get everything. You want to leave some to grow into the pods and propagate the plant for coming years. All right, I'm going to go fill up my basket with milkweed flower heads, and we'll see you in the kitchen.
Oh, great and wondrous world, how the dice of evolution came up with a surprise to make these tiny particles come alive, come alive.
Hi, we're back in the kitchen on the porch, and we're going to do a little bit of simple and fast cooking with the milkweed flower heads that we collected last time we were out in the field, which was a few weeks ago. In the interim between then and now, I've also collected a whole bunch of milkweed pods, anywhere from real tiny ones that are only a ½ inch big upwards of maybe 2-3 inches when they were still nice and soft and milky inside. None of the brown seeds that you'll find in milkweed pods later as the season progresses. What I did was I froze the bag of, this is just one of the bags that we collected last time. I froze these flower heads that we collected, and I also froze the pods. So we had a nice batch to work with now that we're ready to film again. And we're going to do something very easy today, just something real quick and simple that you can do at home with milkweed flower clusters and pods. We're going to do some tapas, some appetizers, some real simple appetizers. Some little roll-ups with the pods and some prosciutto and a little melon. And with the flower heads, we're going to make a little salsa and some bruschetta. And we'll use that with some really nice raw salmon and make some bruschetta with that. So I think what we'll do is we'll do the salsa real quick, the topping for the bruschetta. And I've got most everything prepared already and just ready to mix it up. I didn't want to spend a lot of time, cutting, having you watch me cut ramps or jalapenos or whatever. So what I've done is I've grabbed a cluster of the flower heads, the milkweed flower heads. I would just grab a cluster of them and just cut that little stem off, and they fall apart real easily, just like capers. So I've got probably a cup worth cups worth in here of the milkweed flower heads. I also took one of the ramps that I found, or that I harvested, and I diced it real thin, just like that. I took half of a jalapeno and diced that real thin. We'll throw that in. One garlic clove that I diced also real tiny. We'll throw that in. One medium-sized tomato. That tomatoes give you a lot of juice, a lot of liquid that you may not want. So what I did was I salted that for about a half an hour in a colander, and it just drained some of that juice. There's still some coming out of it. But that's a good way to kind of get some of that moisture out of that tomato, is just salt it and let it sit for a half hour. Then, as I add a little bit of this nice sea salt, sprinkle some of that in, and I've got some really nice flavored olive oils. So we'll put some of that on instead of the lemon juice. Just a little bit of that. So we just mix that all up real well. And I've got this real finely sliced ramp bulb there that we'll use as a garnish as well. Otherwise, you could just use an onion or a shallot, a green onion, anything like that. So what I'm going to do after I've drizzled these with olive oil is I'm going to put these in the oven. It's at about 400 degrees. I'll pop these in the oven for just a few minutes, enough to brown them, and then we'll add everything on top. And that'll be that. Be right back. So now we'll just top everything, all of the baked pieces of oiled bread with our little milkweed salsa mixture. So then we'll take some of this salmon, just kind of twist it on there, like so. Looks cool, tastes good, and it's pretty unusual. Not many, I'll bet you we'll be the only people eating milkweed flowers bruschetta in Wisconsin, maybe even in the country, maybe even in the world tonight. And that's that. I mean, oh, I'm sorry, that's not that. I also have these ramps that I sliced up. And these look pretty cool too. They add a nice bit of contrast on top of the salmon. Okay, so there we go. That's the bruschetta with the milkweed flower heads. The next thing we're going to do real quick is we're going to make some wraps with some prosciutto and some of the larger pods and a little bit of honeydew melon. What I did was I took some honeydew and I just julienned it into these 1/2 inch or so sticks. Put it next to one of the pods. Take a piece of a strip of prosciutto, wrap it around, stick a toothpick in it, and then what I'll end up doing here is, what do I got? I have a Persian lime infused olive oil, or that lemon olive oil. I think we'll use the lime this time, and we'll just drizzle ever so slightly. Get that bee out of there. We'll just drizzle this ever so slightly over these. And finally, a little bit of Parmigiano Reggiano right over the top. And that'll go in the oven for 5-8 minutes, something like that. All right, here we are. Fresh out of the oven, still hot. Wraps with milkweed pods, young milkweed pods, a little bit of honeydew and prosciutto. Drizzled with olive oil. Oh yeah, that'll work. That'll definitely work. It'll work even better with a little bit of homemade apple wine. Wisconsin apples, Wisconsin milkweed, probably Wisconsin toothpicks too. Thank you. This has been Creative Sustenance. We hope you enjoyed the show. We hope you enjoy all the ones that are to come. Cheers.
Oh,